There was a game called Dragon Slayer Academy. It was an RPG where characters studied at an academy and inevitably encountered monsters. This guy was considered the old man of this game. He was number 1 on the leaderboard, the best support. 4 characters gathered to confront a horde of monsters. The very first one from the crowd of monsters to run towards the people was a wolf, with its mouth open and drooling. The protagonist fought back against the beast, and S-rank Saint Lee So blinded the monsters with divine light. Ruby Tower. Master Song Hyunhwa, of the same rank, directed a stream of fire at the creatures. Spraying poison, the huge snake bared its sharp teeth, which were even on the roof of its mouth, raising its sword back. A black-haired guy jumped towards it. Moving his sword forward, S-rank Dark Knight Go Johan split the cold-blooded creature into 2. Having destroyed all the monsters in this room, a group of people entered one of the doors. There, the protagonist discovered a blood gem used to upgrade the vampire class. Taking this gem, the guy called Carmilla, and a brunette with gray skin and pointy ears appeared from the shadows. Handing the stone to the girl, the young man asked her to take it. The red gem began to penetrate Carmilla's skin in the area of the heart. Throughout the game, the guy's favorite mechanic was hero cultivation. You could take new NPCs from the academy and raise them to S rank, the best of the best. And now, having reached S rank and transformed into a red-haired winged vampire queen, Carmilla has become its 1000th graduate. Yawning and stretching on his computer chair in the darkness, the brunette wondered what he should do now. There was nothing else left for him in this game. He promoted every class to S rank several times in a row and now thought about starting to teach ordinary ones. Suddenly, he received a notification. Usually, they were quite rare. The system window stated that for achieving the legendary achievement of 1,000 S rank graduates, something no one had ever achieved before, the young man would be given access to a special task. The guy was surprised. He didn't even know that there were hidden tasks in this game. It was necessary to prevent the end of the world. The difficulty was X rank. This task involved reincarnation. For the player, all of this was also a revelation, because he thought that the highest rank was S. But it turned out that there were items and heroes of a higher rank in the game, which he had never encountered before. The developers released a new update, and the young man saw no reason not to dive into it. Of course, he agreed, and by clicking the mouse on the screen, the player accepted the task. In an instant, he found himself in a familiar forest that he had seen in the game. Now the guy understood that the description of the task referred to his reincarnation in the game world. He did not understand how this was even possible. It was a forest of learning, which meant the young man had to start all over again. When Kim Ho opened the stats window, he saw that all the skills, traits, and equipment were missing. The brunette was indignant that there wasn't even any special ability for reincarnation or anything like that. The next second, he was notified that he had been given a bonus for the reincarnation quest, and traits such as F-rank copy and monarch, as well as F-rank copy and strengthened skills had been learned. Kim's high rank was gone, but the guy was confident that he would be able to get it back in time. At least he had been given something to work with. Finally, the brunette was given a training task. He needed to survive for 10 minutes, for which he could receive a Dragon Slayer Academy beginner's kit as a reward. As far as the guy remembered, he just needed to dodge the weakest mobs, but what he heard didn't sound like the weakest mobs at all. Looking up at the sky, Kim saw blue and red dragons fighting each other. Having decided to run away as far as possible, the guy began to understand that this was the X-rank difficulty, since right at the start, he met 2 S-rank bosses at the start. To carry out the fire attack, the red dragon created magical circles in the sky from which flames burst out. Kim understood that if he was hit, he would be baked without having time to get scared. As he continued running, the boy wondered if this wasn't the perfect moment to try out the copy skill. In order to copy a trait, the young man had to witness it in action, and more importantly, he had to determine the name and rank of the target, which was easy as pie. When the fire reached its target and formed something like an explosion, the brunette looked closely at the blue dragon. Thus, Kim managed to obtain the S-rank fire resistance trait. This made the guy happy, as he didn't expect to get a high-ranking trait at the very beginning. The young man would have liked to obtain the skill as well, but without the mana core, he wouldn't have been able to use it anyway. For now, intercepting the S-rank trait should be enough for him. Suddenly, the brunette noticed how the wind began to blow in the opposite direction. The reason for this was the red dragon, who began to inhale deeply. Realizing that it was the dragon's most dangerous breath attack, Kim started running again. The young man was sure that even with fire resistance, if the dragon hit him at such a distance, the boy could die. Kim tried to run as fast as he could to keep the flames from reaching him. The first training was completed and awarded the Dragon Slayer Academy uniform, student ID card, and train ticket, while the second training required taking the train to the academy. This very train was already standing at the station and waiting for the students. A young man with a ponytail and a sword tied to his back with red cloth entered one of the compartments and explained that there were no seats left, and asked the girl with ash blonde hair, who had laid her head on the table and covered her face with her hands, if she minded him sitting next to her. The girl didn't answer, and then the guy asked if she was asleep. The young man apologized for waking her and was about to leave, but then Kim entered and asked if there were any empty seats. The stranger replied that technically there weren't any, since the girl remained silent about it. Finally, the sleepy blonde with marks forming on her face raised her head, not understanding what was happening. Approaching her and pointing to her seat, Kim asked if she minded if he sat there. She gave a positive answer, and Kim, sitting down next to her, introduced himself, and the girl responded by calling herself So Yeon, while the young man with the ponytail watched this with bewilderment. Kim said that he could sit down too and asked if Yeon minded. The girl nodded silently, and Go Hyunwoo, taking his seat, thanked them. Hyunwoo said he was very grateful because he almost had to stand the whole way. He assured that he would definitely return Brother Kim's kindness. Thinking about how this guy was similar to the protagonist with his manners, the player asked what took him so long. The guy said that he saw two ancient dragons on the way and was so absorbed in looking that he managed to get lost. Kim said that roughly the same thing happened to him, although he himself almost died, getting away with half-burned clothes. After some time, when all the passengers had boarded the train, it moved off and the rails began to rattle. Dragon Slayer Academy was a place Kim returned to time and time again for new heroes. He knew every corner of it like the back of his hand. It was so familiar that it even became boring. But this time there was one major difference, like Hyunwoo and Ian. Students and instructors, none of whom Kim had seen before. The world was the same, but the characters had changed, which meant that events and quests could develop differently. Kim needed to be aware of all the changes. Now the guy felt uncomfortable because the girl was constantly looking at him. Yen had a special eye that assessed everything she saw. In her opinion, the guy sitting opposite him was nothing special. He had a D-rank skill, Heavenly Sword Wind Swordsmanship, and traits such as Swordsmanship, rank C, and Core, rank E. But Kim was special. His status window was littered with questions instead of traits and skills. The girl could count on one hand the times she saw such windows. Unable to withstand such pressure, Kim nevertheless asked why she was looking at him so intently. The girl was embarrassed, remembering one person's advice that if she was interested in someone, she should try to do something nice for him. Yen quickly picked up her suitcase and opened it. Taking out a treat from there, the girl asked if Kim wanted a cookie. The surprised boy, accepting the treat, learned that the cookies were homemade. It didn't taste that bad. Kim asked Hyunwoo if the thing next to him was a longsword. Go replied that it was a sacred relic of his clan. He was sorry, but for now he was not worthy of breaking the seal of this weapon, so it remained tied up. Until now, Hyunwoo's companion had been the Iron Blade, but there was no need to worry, as he had never yet met anyone he couldn't defeat with it. Kim advised them to find a stronger blade, but he was suddenly interrupted by a very loud guy who entered and asked if the passengers were against his presence, assuring them that he was only there for a short time. Despite all the noise, Kim did not hear the stranger's footsteps, but it seemed to him that he still knew this man. Kim asked why someone who had not even boarded the train properly would come to them. The stranger laughed and replied that the young man had figured him out. The man handing out the business card said that no matter where they were, they just needed to call Shin Byung-chul. He was from a delivery service in the style of the Dragon Slayer Academy. For a fee, they were ready to bring whatever they asked for, even things that violated the rules of the academy. Kim suggested that Shin was being targeted because of this work. Byung-chul was surprised that it was so obvious, and Kim explained that he kept looking out the window as if someone was chasing him. Shin suggested we talk about it later. As if stuck to the glass, Byung-chul became alarmed. One of the girls from the group that entered the same carriage told the guy to get out since they knew where he was. The disciplinary squad was already here, and Byung-chul had to leave. The Student Discipline Committee was responsible for maintaining order in and around the academy, with first-year students recruited as early as possible for training and then released straight onto the train. The same girl demanded the return of an item that was clearly not meant for Shin's hands. Byung-chul tried to escape again, but then he was struck by an electric charge. Apparently, this girl was one of those rare magicians who possessed the element of lightning. Kim knew that his ability could copy another skill. He could appropriate something useful for himself. While a nervous Shin was saying he was terrible in a direct fight, Kim's cookie rolled at the student's feet. As she put on her gloves, the girl decided that since Byung-chul was not giving in, she had to knock him unconscious. She snapped her fingers and electricity filled the air. Using her element, the girl sent a hummingbird at Shin. The frightened boy began to cover himself with his hands from the lightning-fast bird. But before she could reach her target, Kim grabbed her with his bare hand. The surprised student asked if Shin really had an accomplice. As he left the compartment, Kim replied that this was not entirely true. Pointing to the treat, the guy explained that it was his cookie and he dropped it because of the girl. The student was taken aback by the fact that the young man intervened because of some baked goods, and the hummingbird magical skill was copied. Kim noted that the cookies were delicious, so he was furious. The long-haired guy from the committee was outraged by these baseless accusations. He said that if Kim did not step aside while they were being kind, the student would show the young man what pain was. Hyunwoo, who came out to support Kim, hoped that his opponents would be reasonable and cautious, because he would not stand idly by if they drew their weapons. There was silence in the corridor. The atmosphere was becoming tense. The student asked Kim what he thought about them sending him a coupon for a free dessert at the student cafeteria, and he happily agreed. Again, worried, Shin asked how he was, and Kim told him to figure it out on his own. A satisfied Kim mentally thanked him for the new E-rank skill, and his trait also changed to elemental resistance. After learning that Shin had stolen the station worker's wig, the young man agreed that Byung-chul deserved a little beating for such a prank. A student from the committee, passing by Kim, advised him not to get involved with Shin, and the guy replied that he would decide that himself. The girl chuckled, and soon the group left the carriage. Hyunwoo assumed that the people who left were from the disciplinary committee. Byung-chul confirmed this, and explained that the committee members were chosen from among the elite, and the one who used the hummingbird was Song Junhye. This girl was from the Topaz Magic Tower, and was the granddaughter of the Lightning King Kyungwook. The other three members of the committee were also not to be underestimated. Cho Byok was the disciple of the King of Fists, Han Somi was the disciple of the Queen of Swords, and Gyum Yohan was the only heir to the Golden Lotus Pavilion, although he was a little lower level than the others. As he left, Shin said goodbye, asking the boys to say hello to him next time. Hyunwoo asked if Kim really stood up for the cookie, and he replied that Junhee was a rare lightning mage, so he was curious about what she was capable of. Go was surprised that the young man was able to easily block one of Song's skills, and Kim asked what he even knew about the hummingbird skill. Hyunwoo replied that he saw it for the first time. The skill was so fast that it was difficult to follow with the eye. It seemed that instead of causing damage, it was intended to paralyze or immobilize the target. Kim said the guy was half right, and explained that the spell was called hummingbird because it depicted a bird in flight. Its capabilities varied depending on the skill of the performer, meaning that the skill of the magician could be recognized by the bird's movements. If Chunhye were truly experienced the moment he intervened, the hummingbird's trajectory would have immediately changed. However, the bird flew straight into his hand, which means that either the girl lacked control or combat experience. Go was amazed that Kim was able to glean so much information from one spell. However, that wasn't all. Kim didn't say that this spell was an E-rank spell at the level of a D rank, which meant that either Song had a good trait or a huge natural mana reserve. In any case, the granddaughter of the Lightning King lived up to the name, and it was worth adding him to the recruitment list. Hyunwoo pointed out that they had just met, and he had already learned a lot, meaning it was fate. But Kim replied that fate had nothing to do with it, and he could easily teach it. Go said that the guy was generous, and if help was needed, Hyunwoo would do everything in his power. In that case, Kim wanted the boy to go with him, but first asked him to lend him some silver. Kim lifted the cloth to reveal a slot machine with a sign that said "out of order." The train was originally intended for tourism, and the boys were now on the site of a former casino, which was a bit of a mess. As Kim slipped in the silver coin, he hoped the machine wasn't broken. The reels began to spin, showing different pictures. Thus, the secret event seemingly broken slot machine took place. Kim was not averse to taking advantage of the opportunity and pulled the lever. The very first prize was a regular bottle of water. This was not at all what the guy expected, but then again, he didn't expect much. Go asked the boy why he had come there, and he replied that technically it was against school rules. The problem wasn't with the machine itself, but with the items it dispensed. Hyunwoo asked if he should stand guard, and Kim, who had once again gotten the wrong thing, said not to worry, since the disciplinary committee didn't come here often and most likely the students were now heading in the opposite direction. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of first-year student Han Somi, who asked what they were doing there. The girl advised against playing with the machine gun, as students were forbidden from even touching it. and breaking school rules could be punished with penalty points. Kim whispered to himself if Go could buy them a little time, and the guy replied that he would try. He still wanted to check something. Khan asked if the boys knew that helping someone break the rules was also breaking the rules. Go replied that he would take that risk, and it was his decision. Hyunwoo explained that he had heard that Lady Han had learned the art of fencing from the Queen of the Sword. The boy asked to see her skills. Somi asked what his name was, and the young man introduced himself. The next second, the girl with the sword pounced on Go, who successfully blocked the blow. Then Hyunwoo tried to attack as well, but Han pulled back. Having charged the sword with energy, the girl rushed at Go again. The boy winced and blocked the blow again. Kim noticed that Hyunwoo lacked inner strength. His core was somewhat weak. However, he was not going to give up. He still had something to show. Therefore, Kim used a buff that raised Go's core trait from E to C rank. The duration of this buff was only 1 minute, and the recharge was only possible after an hour. The minute quickly melted away. Hyunwoo used it to block his opponent's blows and attack unsuccessfully. As he continued to throw in silver coins and pull the lever, Kim glanced periodically at the battle. These slot machines were one of the most famous casino games, and players usually didn't like losing their coins this way, but they didn't know something. This machine had a guaranteed big win mechanism called a guarantor. Players started the game with only 5 coins. As a result of the 5th spin, the guy received a tin can. With the help of a borrowed coin, the machine was guaranteed to give a better reward on the 6th try. In other words, the 6th time the probability of hitting the jackpot was 100%. So the last time Kim was able to obtain a C-rank dark ice crystal, which had a very cold taste. It had to be handled with caution, as it could kill. Seeing this, Somi rushed to the young man for the machine gun. She tried to attack Kim, however. Sacrificing his blade, which eventually fell into pieces, Hyunwoo parried her blow, stating that this was not the end. This was the last second of the power-up. Now that he had seen enough, Kim decided to absorb the dark ice crystals, which worried the student. Feeling pain, the guy grabbed his throat, and the frozen effect was added to him. Relaxed again, Kim said he was fine, which surprised Hyunwoo and Han, who now didn't understand what kind of bottle it was. Kim explained that it was some kind of elixir that, after using it, would replenish mana reserves. One of the guaranteed items on the 6th spin was a dark ice crystal. For beginners, it was an extremely deadly poison. Just one tiny crystal could instantly transform into an ice statue. Of course, the young man was an exception, since he had S-rank resistance to elements. The harmful cold disappeared, and a huge amount of ice crystal energy accumulated in his body. Go assumed that Kim had managed to convince the lady, but the guy himself thought that if she had checked into such nonsense, she was stupid. Hyunwoo said that he was glad to help Kim, because thanks to him he got to spar on equal terms with Han, and even received something valuable in return. Kim replied that Go also helped him a lot by lending him silver. Hyunwoo asked if he could see this strengthening technique again, but Kim replied that he could only show it next time, and for now he couldn't use it, and he didn't want to reveal all his cards. An hour hadn't passed yet, and revealing his abilities really was stupid. Go said that he understood this because such a serious technique simply had to have its own conditions. Kim noted that today was clearly not the last time he used it, and in the future it would be needed more than once. The students had almost reached the academy. The train, which moved along rails installed on the water, was arriving at its last stop, Dungeon Island. The island was so named because it was full of dungeons. In the past, it was a lawless place filled with all sorts of bandits. But one day, the first hero and dragon slayer appeared in this place. Having entered the island of dungeons, he cleared it of criminals, conquered all the dungeons, and founded an academy. This is how the Dragon Slayer Academy came into being. Someone shouted at the freshmen to follow them. Others, on the contrary, said not to follow the seniors. Hyunwoo liked the atmosphere that reigned in this place. There were quite a lot of people in the academy square, and it was noisy. Kim was walking next to Hyunwoo and Yeon when he was addressed. With an indignant sigh, Song said that he should have walked with her for a minute. Chunhee brought the boy to the disciplinary committee office and told him to sit down. There was only one room in the disciplinary committee office, and everyone who entered it came out different, and it was called the Room of Truth. A device measuring the effects of weakening showed that Kim was fine, even though he ate what came out of the slot machine. The head of the disciplinary committee, third-year student Oh Sehun, noted that it apparently was not a prohibited subject. However, the head of the committee also explained that failure to comply with the order was a violation of the rules. Since no one was hurt, and this was Kim's first offense, Sehun decided to turn a blind eye to his misdeed, but still expressed hope that this was their last meeting here. Getting up from the table, the guy replied that this is how it will be, after which the third-year student let him go, wishing him good luck in his studies. While sipping his drink, Sehun told Junha, who was standing behind him, that she apparently wasn't thrilled with the guy no matter how you looked at it, and his actions were suspicious. If his goal wasn't to confuse the forbidden, there was no point in using the slot machine, just as there was no point in getting rid of the result on the spot. Song said that there was a high chance that Kim had an unfinished skill, and if they used the enhancement to test his skills, they could expose him. The leader asked what would happen if they didn't find anything. If they got to the point of using the enhancement to check and didn't find anything, what would they do then? After bowing, Chunhei apologized, realizing that she had apparently rushed things. Sehun said that he understood her initiative, but in such matters it was necessary to step back and look at the picture as a whole. The guy noted that it was time for the girl to go, otherwise she might be late for the induction ceremony. Upon arriving at the ceremony, Kim saw that Hyunwoo and Ian had saved a seat for him, for which he thanked them. Arriving on time, the young man completed the third part of the training, for which he received a reward in the form of a ticket for choosing an E-rank weapon and 5 silver coins. In his opinion, even an E-rank weapon was better than nothing, and Kim also unexpectedly returned the money he spent on the slot machine. The students saw a man in a tracksuit and flip-flops walk onto the stage, accompanied by a formally dressed girl. The students wondered if it was really the rector, as the man's appearance didn't match his status. They said he had once led a squad of dragon slayers. Traditionally, the head of the academy was a retired hero who had returned from the front lines. The title of hero was given to only one S-rank representative out of countless others, and while it might not be obvious now, an immense power was seething within him. The students, causing Kim to cry with embarrassment, whispered that the saint had already refused the man for the 5th time. Standing behind the podium, the rector greeted the students and congratulated them on their admission. He said that long ago the academy was founded to prepare for the war against dragons and to train dragon slayers. The first hero insisted on the word killer in the title, most likely in order to make the students think deeply about what a killer is. After all, one could not be an ogre killer without killing ogres. And likewise, one could not be a dragon killer without killing the dragon itself. Listening to this completely unimpressive speech, Kim wondered when it would end. And the rector continued to say that taking a life was the essence and fate of a dragon slayer. There was no need to turn away from the truth. But it was better to ask yourself why you decided to become a killer and why you sought such a life. He hoped that everyone would find the answers before they graduated. Surprisingly, Hyunwoo was inspired by the rector's speech, while everyone else was either sleeping or waiting with difficulty and a headache for it to end. Finally, the man said that he hoped that all the students would become true heroes of the academy. Go noted that it was a truly meaningful speech. Kim asked if the boy wasn't bored. Hyunwoo replied that every word was full of priceless wisdom. His teacher gave such instructions every day. Kim was surprised that the boy had to listen to such things every day. Finally, the time came for the girl who had left with the rector to speak up. She explained that this year the list of prohibited items had been expanded, and any of these items found on students were to be immediately confiscated, and the students themselves were to be subject to disciplinary action. Also, for the future, all new students were only allowed to have practical training on the first floor of the dungeon building. If they went down to the bottom floor without a solution and caused trouble, their clan, magic tower, or guild could face problems. Everyone would feel an insane amount of pressure. The girl continued to say that a fleeting curiosity could bring misfortune to everyone, so the students had to remember these rules and follow them to avoid consequences. At this point, the entrance ceremony was concluded, and those present were asked to return to their dormitories for lunch. Everyone began to slowly disperse. Yen was still sleeping, which is why Kim had to nudge her to wake her up. Someone approached them and offered to eat together. Surprised, Hyunwoo asked what happened to Shin's face, who replied that it was just a little scratched and there was no need to worry. He advised him to have a good meal tonight. Go asked why Byung-chul said that. Shin explained that tomorrow was the first day of classes, a very important day. When Hyunwoo and Kim arrived at the boys' dorm, they found out that their rooms were next to each other, which made Go happy but not Kim. Entering his room, Kim decided that he definitely would not sleep. The young man carefully hung his uniform in the closet, changed into a t-shirt and shorts, and sat on the bed in the lotus position. He figured that in moments of free time like this, it was necessary to create a core. To use any skill that required mana or internal energy, one needed to have an internal source of energy, and that was the role of the core. It was the first time Kim had ever done anything like this live, but he had a good idea of what and how to do it. He had absorbed the crystal, so he had more than enough mana and should definitely be able to handle it. At the same time, Hyunwoo was sitting on the floor in his room in the same position as Kim. Han was the strongest opponent he had faced since coming down from the mountain. In fact, they both held back a bit during the fight. But even if they had given it their all, the outcome would have been difficult to predict. If it weren't for Kim's help, which allowed him to compensate for his weakness, he would most likely have lost even before his sword broke. Strength. That was the word Go had associated with Kim since their meeting. The type of calm available only to the strong, the look of one who sees everything. Hyunwoo wondered if he should ask Kim for help. The guy decided that it was impossible to do this. Kim was his first friend here. Go decided to do everything in his power. He also began to form the core. The next day, the first-year students gathered in a temporary classroom. The last student to arrive was Yen. Hyunwoo was worried that she would oversleep, but Kim was sure that this was the case. The bell rang, but the teacher didn't show up. Kim didn't know who it was, but their class teacher was clearly someone irresponsible. The joyful students laughed and actively discussed something, but they were shocked and immediately fell silent when they saw their leader. A middle-aged man whose face was covered in various scars remarked that, judging by the students' reactions, he was quite famous, and the leader introduced himself as Lee Sudok. Pointing to one of the students, the man asked him to tell him what the leader was called. The frightened youth, stuttering, answered questioningly that his name was a hunter of villains, but the man asked for another nickname, one that consisted of one word, and now Kim knew who the man was, who was called the Butcher. In the world of Dragon Slayer Academy, there were more superhumans who had transcended human limitations than there was sand on the beach, and among them were those who used their powers to satisfy their own twisted desires. The existence of such villains was inevitable. Lee was tasked with hunting them down and capturing such villains, but his nickname suggested he had killed far more than he had captured alive. The manager said that he did not want to be there, but accepted the rector's request. No matter how many jobs Sudok took on, he did not fail at any of them, and the man really hoped that none of the students would tarnish his perfect record. Making the students fear him even more, the leader said that he would rather kill them than let them fail their exams. Well, now the man said that he would explain the student evaluation system. 30% was for written work, another 10% for behavior, for breathing and staying out of trouble. For some students, this could be free points. The behavior score could go into the negative and therefore affect the rest of the grades. So Sudok was going to keep an eye on those who were rotten. Who knew? Maybe they would meet again after graduation. Next came the most important part. Practical exams. They were divided into dungeon raids, where students had to defend dungeon floors, and duels, where they fought with other students, and the assessment was carried out in an arc. In other words, it was necessary to show better results than the student next to you. Both raids and duels gave 30% of the grade. Sudok asked if there were any questions. Everyone was silent, so he said that in that case they would go to the arena, because it was time to test their abilities. When the first-year students arrived at the designated location, sparring was already underway there. Shin noted that it was a big event on a big day, and now Hyunwoo understood what Byungchul meant yesterday. To prepare students for various situations, the rules of the duel changed every time. The rule of today's duels was a fight to the death, but not quite to the death. The duel ended when one of the parties was exhausted or surrendered. The fight time was limited to 5 minutes. If the winner was not determined, the judge decided, or a draw was declared. Each student had to compete against 3 randomly selected students from the corresponding year and receive points depending on the number of victories, with 300 points awarded for 1 victory and 0 points for a draw or loss. Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of Kim, notifying him of a new side quest. The guy needed to get an above-average result on the exam, and to do this, he needed to perform well during the dungeon raid and win at least 1 duel. As a reward, he was given 1 slot for a support skill. Kim thought it was a good assignment, but right now, something else was more important to him. These exams were the perfect time to study the other students, a chance to find those who had the potential to reach X rank, or to memorize students whose traits or skills were worth copying. A little later, it was time for Kim and Hong Yong-hui to fight. Kim's opponent was from the Ruby Tower, which specialized in fire magic. Known for their massive firepower and incredible territorial control, they were always the guy's favorite in the game, and the girl was better off just playing along with him for those 5 minutes. Yonghwa wanted to make a name for herself, and to do that she needed to defeat someone famous, but she had never heard of her opponent. Hong wondered why the young man had chosen this particular weapon, as even a novice mage would have snorted disdainfully at this E-rank Earth Staff, which only slightly increased Earth element and defensive spells. Kim clearly didn't look like a person from the Emerald Tower, and didn't look like an Earth mage, so the girl was sure that the enemy was most likely using the staff to enhance defensive magic. The length of the staff indicated that the opponent preferred strength over mobility, meaning he was a stationary support mage. Hong decided to quickly end everything with one attack, and as soon as the countdown for the start of the duel reached 1, she aimed the skill Ignition at the guy. Everyone started discussing how good the girl was with her spell, which Yonghua really liked. However, when she looked at the bill, she was incredibly surprised. Both she and Kim still had 100%. The girl couldn't believe it. She didn't expect to win with one blow, but this shocked her. Her attack did nothing to Kim at all. A nervous Hong wondered if the guy had actually used dispersion. Yonghua wasn't about to give up. Acting decisively, she extended her staff forward with one hand and formed a magic circle with the other. The girl was sure that her opponent would not be able to defend against such a scattering attack. A magical sign also formed under the young man's feet, and a fire began to blaze around Kim. Hong waited for it to move. She was ready to react immediately as soon as the guy opened up. However, despite Hong's hopes, Kim simply stood there. The girl began to grin, considering her opponent overconfident. She decided to see how he would block the next blow and summoned a column of fire. The flame immediately hid the young man and began to rise upward. Some of the spectators sympathized with the guy, while others admired the Ruby Tower. When the fire died down, the Hongs became disillusioned with themselves again. Her magic as the future master of the Ruby Tower didn't even scratch Kim, and the girl understood that at this rate she would have to use her trump card. Finally, the guy decided to attack. Hong didn't expect him to use Hummingbird. The bird rushed towards the girl, and Yonghua barely managed to dodge it. However, after flying past, the hummingbird turned around and hit the girl in the back. Hong, who fell on her knee, was paralyzed. The guy suggested that she stop there. He felt that Yonghua wanted to save her trump card for later. Kim told the immobilized and dissatisfied girl to think about the next fights. So the young man won, and the spectators were surprised at how it happened, why the guy survived the blows, and what kind of fast technique he used. People wondered who this Kim was, who did not look like a promising newcomer at all. The guy stood out more than he had expected and thought he should have been more careful. Kim didn't have time to rest before he was assigned to a duel again. This time his opponent was Chunhei, who immediately became the talk of the stands. As she walked into the arena and pulled on a black glove, Song stated that she was lucky to have met Kim and wanted to check something out. In response, the young man only stood silently and looked at the girl. Then, completely unexpectedly for everyone, he turned away and said that he gave up. Not understanding this decision, Sudok asked why the young man wanted to give up. Clutching his neck, Kim explained that he was not feeling well, and it would be difficult for him to continue fighting like that. The leader asked whether it would not have been better to increase the score while there was an opportunity, and whether the young man really wanted to give up. Kim responded positively and asked to immediately record the surrender in the third fight. Lee explained that this would be counted as a defeat. Chunhee clenched her hand into a fist as anger surged through her. Forcing the guy to look at her, the girl called him a weakling. She then began to quote her grandfather, who said that one had to always be ready for battle, and only those who did not give up and achieved victory, even in unfavorable situations, could reach the top. Grandpa Chunhye was the Lightning King, and they were quite similar to each other for someone who aspired to be a hero. This advice was indeed worth remembering, but not that it applied to Kim. The guy said he seemed cut from a different cloth and suggested Song just say she won. Turning away, she noted that it was a disappointment for her. The girl felt like a fool for having had any hopes for the guy at all. Kim caught her attention, causing Chunhee to turn around. The young man grinned and asked her not to forget that she had promised him dessert, which he would be waiting for. The provocation made Song's veins bulge and her teeth grind, while lightning began to flow around her. The next fight was to be between Song and Yan Chi-hong, who felt that if the girl was from the Topaz Tower, then he was lucky with his opponent. The guy asked if Chunhee was ready, and only then noticed that she was in a very aggressive mood. When the duel was declared to begin, without a second's hesitation, Song launched a bolt of lightning at Yang. Chi-hong fell to his knees. The girl won after the first attack. Shin noted that Yan was badly burned, which Kim agreed with. Chi-hong was placed on a stretcher and carried out of the arena, and Byung-chul said it was good that Kim gave in before he got roasted like that. Song looked at Kim, her hatred burning. An alarmed Shin asked if the boy had seen that look, to which the young man remained silent. Someone noted that Chunhee was all about the Lightning King, and her entrance was brilliant from the very beginning. Kim overheard a conversation between students who decided that the guy was a coward for deciding to surrender to Song, and that his victory over Yanghua was just luck. The young man just smiled, because this was exactly the reputation he wanted to achieve. They started announcing the next duel, and Shin became curious about who was unlucky enough to go up against Chunhee. It was So Yeon, armed with pistols. Kim and Byung-chul did not expect this turn of events at all. They were wondering if firearms were good against magicians. Maybe this time Chunhee would have lost. Kim said they could only sit and watch, while Shin said that if Yen had learned the basics, she could very well win. Then Kim suggested making a bet, and he put 5 silver coins on Song. All this time, Byung-chul, who was writing something down in his notebook, happily accepted this challenge. A serious Chunhee and a relaxed Yen prepared for battle. As soon as the command to begin was heard, the female shooter fired several bullets. Without flinching, Song extended her hand and 4 ball lightning formed around it. The incoming bullets never reached her, melting in the electricity. Shin was surprised that Yoonhee was able to block it, but Kim expected it. Song had large mana reserves. Even an E-rank hummingbird looked like a D rank in her hands. 2 birds were flying towards Yen. The girl tried to get rid of them with shots, but it didn't work. The hummingbirds were still flying towards her, and Yen had to dodge at the last moment. But now, being in an awkward position, the girl was more vulnerable to the turning hummingbirds. Yen still tried to pull away a little more, but one of the birds, albeit slightly, touched her cheek. The second bird returned to its owner, who watched as its opponent fell. Byung-chul was worried. If the blow hadn't gone in a glancing blow, the fight would have been over, however. Even though Yen dodged, her movements were still slowed down. Once you were struck by lightning, the next blow was guaranteed to hit. Just as Kim predicted, Chunhee should have easily won this fight. The girl, who had suddenly fallen, took out a grenade and threw it at Song. Before Chunhee could react, the arena began to fill with fog. Kim was amazed that Yen used a smoke grenade, and Shin noted that it was a great move, as a regular grenade would not have injured Chunhee anyway. Byung-chul said that everything would be different now. That was where the full power of the shooters was revealed. A worried Song stood in the middle of the smoke, unable to see anything ahead. A suddenly fired bullet of mana flew into her back. Chunhee managed to avoid a direct hit with a magical barrier, but the force of the blow was still strong enough to cause her to lose her balance. The girl understood that at this rate the situation would quickly become dangerous. Shin hadn't thought Song was that rich, and it was unlikely anyone would have expected the new student to use the invisibility cloak. Switching to a rifle also seemed like a good idea to him. From a distance, Yen fired again, but the smoke was already clearing and Song was prepared for it, so she was able to dodge. Chunhee was only slightly behind her opponent, with only 2 minutes remaining. Song knew she couldn't stand on the defensive like that. She turned around and Yen had moved behind her again. A shot followed, which was stopped by an invisible obstacle. Chunhee had to understand the trajectory of the magic bullets. Another projectile hit the energy wall. Song thought this was her chance. She crouched down and sent an energy current through the ground. To avoid being hit, Yen jumped. However, it turned out that this was a trick by Chunhee. Confident that her opponent would not be able to dodge this, Song sent a hummingbird at her, and when it reached Yen, the bird paralyzed her, causing minor damage. The girl fell, and at that moment the time allotted for the duel ended. Yen lost. Shin clutched his head, shocked by the victory. Now he owed Kim 5 silver coins. Kim, however, suggested that Song most likely had no competition among the newcomers. But the fact that Ian was able to hold out against her until the very end impressed the guy. Without delay, Byung-chul gave the coins to the young man. However, Shin then, wanting to watch 3 more matches, suggested making another bet with the same conditions. Kim asked if Byung-chul was a gambling addict. In his opinion, 1 bet was enough. Shin explained that when Kim sees everything for himself, he will change his mind. This time, the duel was to take place between Hyunwoo and the King of Fist's disciple, Cho Byok. This time, Kim decided to bet on Byuk, being confident of his victory in this fight. In that case, Byung-chul bet on Hyunwoo and asked how Kim wasn't ashamed not to believe in his friend. And the guy replied that he was only talking about this fight, and he never said that Go would lose. Shin asked Kim what he meant, and he said that he would understand everything when he saw it. Hyunwoo noticed that Kim was looking at him. Go wanted to show him his victory, but he understood that it would not be as easy as he would like. Hyunwoo took out his weapon from the sheath that was attached to his belt, and Byuk asked if he would take out the sword that was on his back. Go replied that now, unfortunately, was not the time. Buck stated that despite this, he still would not give in. Then Hyunwoo asked his opponent to show what he could do. The fight began and Buck took off, closing the distance. When Byuk got close, Hyunwoo tried to attack him, but his opponent easily dodged. As expected of the Fist King's disciple, his movements were flawless. As if engulfed in flames, Byuk's fist rushed towards Go, who tried to defend himself with his sword. Even though Hyunwoo neutralized some of the force of the blow, he was still thrown back a decent distance. Go guessed that simple attacks wouldn't work on this man. Just as Hyunwoo stood firmly on the ground again, Byuk rushed towards him, preparing to attack again. Go decided to finish the fight with one blow of the pure flow technique. Fiery and watery energy inevitably gravitated towards each other. Having flown forward, Go and Byuk found themselves behind each other, Hyunwoo's sword falling apart. Without a weapon, Go could no longer continue the fight and had to surrender. Clutching a scratch on his shoulder, Byuk said he would look forward to their next fight. As Kim expected, the iron sword couldn't withstand this. The guy saw this on the train. He had a little hope, but as expected, Hyunwoo used the slashing swords as consumables. Shin clutched his head again, not understanding how his classmate had been able to predict this. Putting his hand on Byung-chul's shoulder, Kim said that he had been talking a lot. The guy demanded his money, but Shin didn't have it at the moment. Kim explained that he could have taken it in something other than cash. Byung-chul could very well have paid with the information he had. Everyone was released for lunch, after which the students were supposed to gather at the entrance to the dungeon building to conduct a raid. But now, Shin, Kim, and Ian were sitting on the lawn. While eating a sandwich, Byung-chul asked indistinctly what information Kim needed. Not understanding him, the indignant guy said to finish eating first and then talk. After apologizing, Shin repeated his question, and Kim asked to tell about the talented students from the 4 main factions. At the Dragon Slayer Academy, in addition to official groups like the Disciplinary Committee, there were 4 major factions: the Murim Alliance, the Guild Federation, the Magic Tower Society, and the Knightly Order. Among them were such outstanding talents as the grandson of the Holy Sword Moyeon Hyunsung of the Murim Alliance, Moyeon Yoon. It was also the speculated next chapter of Hong Yonghwa's Ruby Tower of Magic. In the Guild Federation, the talents were Pak Nari, a druid girl who walked around with a cat on her shoulder, and another promising talent who didn't stand out because he hid his skills. Seong Hyun showed promise in the Knightly Order. These were the ones that Kim would call uniquely strong. It was a good lineup. Byung-chul asked where Hyunhwa had disappeared to. Suddenly the phone rang and Shin remembered the club president. Byung-chul apologized and ran off somewhere, declaring that he should have arrived first. Kim watched him go and thought what a weirdo this guy was. The young man looked at the sad Yen, who was slowly eating her sandwich. Perhaps it was only because this girl was his first acquaintance in this world that Kim couldn't just leave her in such a depressed state. He asked if Yen remembered that he dropped a cookie on the train yesterday. Song sent him dessert, and since it was a girl's cookie, the boy thought it was only right to share it with her. A blueberry cake appeared in front of them, and Kim invited Yen to eat it together. The girl asked him why he thought she lost to Chunhye. Kim replied that at that level, it was difficult to break through the magic barrier with magic bullets. And given Song's superior magic power, it was no wonder that Chunhye was so powerful. The guy also replied that if Ian strengthened the magic bullets with his mana training, it would be a completely different story. The girl was puzzled by this. It turned out that she had never trained before and did not understand why she needed it. Kim asked how Yen was able to create a magic bullet in the first place. The young man was surprised that she had not studied this skill at all, but was still able to use it. Kim decided that the girl was a genius. The mana bullet skill was considered basic for a shooter. Apparently, Yen was shooting based on instinct and still hitting her target. She was able to cause so much trouble for Song without even training. Kim asked the girl if she would mind if he spent a little time to help her, to which Yen agreed. The young man said that once the girl starts training her mana and learns skills, everything will go a little easier. However, even so, she did well. And now it's time for dungeon raids. The students gathered in front of the portals in the dungeon hall, where Sudok was to explain the next stage of their studies. The lesson was to take place in a dungeon that was located behind the portal behind him. It was called the Misty Forest, and it had its own rules. For 10 minutes, every monster killed was credited to the student's account, whose goal was to destroy as many high-value monsters as possible. The dungeon had a fixed F-rank zone. In short, in this zone, all skills, equipment, and traits were set to the corresponding rank. Also, the core of the students dropped to F-rank, so they had to be careful. And if they didn't watch their mana expenditure, they would regret it. Lee called the students one by one, and they emerged from the dungeon already quite exhausted. Sudok considered it a disgrace how weak his students were. According to the director, only 2 students tried hard. One of them was Somi, who took first place and scored 928 points. Just thinking about teaching these fools made Sudoku's head hurt. Kim and Ian were supposed to go into the dungeons next. The guy advised the girl to use a rifle for this test, and she obeyed. The young man said that if she suddenly started having problems with mana control, then she just needed to shoot anyone who came too close in the head. Yen took this into account, and Chunhei, who was standing behind her, was mentally indignant that this guy wasn't even a shooter, but was still giving advice. Kim told Yen that they would see each other again, and then entered the portal. When the young man found himself in a forest he hadn't been to for a long time. As stated, his skills, traits, and equipment instantly locked at rank F. Kim decided he needed to get his bearings and stretch his legs, but at that moment something green was spinning behind him. This something continued to remain in this form while the young man clicked on the system window. The test countdown began, and the green goblin that had formed rushed at the guy. Turning around, Kim hit the monster in the teeth with his staff. Losing his knife, the goblin went flying. At first, it seemed like monsters in the misty forest were appearing randomly immediately after entering the dungeon. But in fact, there was a pattern to their appearance. Having caught the knife, Kim tried to guess where the next monster would appear. Kim launched the blade at a specific spot where another monster began to form. Thus the point pierced the goblin's eye, and he could no longer prevent his death. The monster fell, and the young man decided that he no longer needed the staff. There were weapons lying around everywhere. You could just borrow something from the orcs or goblins. That's exactly what Kim did. Tomorrow he got an axe from a monster and pulled a knife out of it. The guy looked at how new monsters materialized and noted that the points wouldn't earn themselves. The monsters screamed hysterically, their blood spilling throughout the forest. There were still 7 minutes left for the test. Kim saw 2 trolls coming up behind him. With a flick of his wrist, the boy launched his knife at the monsters and took them out. At that moment, he realized he should have deleted the recording, because if the monsters' deaths coincided with his movements, people might get the wrong idea. In 3 minutes, Kim managed to score 683 points. Since the side quest had already been completed, the young man decided to stop there, as more points could attract unnecessary attention to him. Having decided that he had had enough for today, the guy left the dungeon. He found that Yen had also finished the test. During the entire time, the girl, who looked rather tired in contrast to Kim, managed to score 781 points. The young man asked how it was, and Yen replied that it was quite difficult. Kim noted that his friend's score was not bad. Looking at the guy, Sudok was sure that he had run away again, unable to hold out for 10 minutes. Lee wondered if the young man, with such a miserable attitude, really thought he could kill dragons. But seeing Kim's average high result in such a short time, the man was surprised. He doubted that such a thing had ever happened before. Sudok decided to keep a better eye on this young man. Next was Hyunwoo, who Kim told to be careful. Now, in the table, the grandson of the swordmaster Lee Sung-hyun was in first place, in second place was Han Somi, and in third place was Moyeon Yoon, the grandson of the Holy Sword. Since the best talents were at Somi's level, Kim was confident that Hyunwoo had a chance. The table was updated as the young man expected, and Go had already moved into first place. When Hyunwoo came out, someone said that they already knew during the duels that this guy was strong, and someone was surprised how it was possible to score 1,000 points. Kim said it was a good job, and Go replied that it was all thanks to him. Hyunwoo believed that he did so well because the guy let him rest after the duel, but Kim said that Go was exaggerating his role a bit. Hyunwoo heard the students discussing Kim, who had surrendered after the first match, and they were unhappy that even a coward could take a high position here. An angry Go wanted to stand up for his friend, but Kim stopped him, asking him to forget about those guys. Hyunwoo still wanted to help somehow, but the young man explained that he didn't care what they said and didn't need to worry about it. Sighing, Go accepted his friend's decision. Looking at the table, the guy assumed that it was already over, but Hyunwoo said that Chunhee was not on the table yet. While waiting, Kim looked back at the portal. The goblins surrounded the girl, who tried to fight back with electricity. Chunhee expected the monsters to weaken, but they only slowed down a little. She remembered Kim's words about shooting all enemies who came close in the head. Song didn't want to admit it, but what the guy said stuck in her head, given the limited mana. There was a ceiling on the damage of area of effect spells. Deciding that she needed to direct the mana to 1 point, strengthening the lightning, the girl delivered a heavy blow and the goblin split into 2. Over the entire period, Chunhee managed to score only 571 points, which was even less than Kim. The girl was mentally indignant that the score was posted for everyone to see. She was ashamed that the number of points she had scored could not be called good. The leader announced that their selection exam was now complete. The results would be announced tomorrow. And for now, the students had to rest and not let this affect their studies. After this speech, Sudok let everyone go. Later, Lee visited the study where the shelves were filled with books. He wanted to review the recording of Kim's selection exam from class 1 to 3, and his interlocutor was surprised, since this was the first time Sudok had shown interest in any student. Lee said it was unimportant and demanded to see the recording again. Only it turned out that the recording was not saved and could not be viewed. The person responsible for this said that it was possible to check the logs, and having done so, the employee was amazed. As Sudok thought his premonition was right, this guy deliberately deleted the recording. Seeing that it took Kim only 3 minutes to earn that many points, the man thought that if he continued at this pace, he would easily surpass the 2,000-point threshold in 10 minutes. Sudok did not understand why he needed to hide his skills. There were many allies and enemies in the Dragon Slayer Academy, such as dragon servants and evil god apostles. If any of them infiltrated the academy, it would be wise to immediately take countermeasures. The employee asked if they should have notified the rector, but Lee said it would have been better to watch a little longer. If the information had surfaced before they had clear evidence, then Kim would have been better off hiding. As he left, Sudok thought that if this guy really had evil intentions, he would soon reveal himself, and Lee was going to continue to watch. At 3:27 p.m., Kim was in the Dragon Slayer Academy cafeteria and asked for a glass of coffee. Hyunwoo said that he was also interested in this coffee. After examining the dishes and rubbing her eye, Yen said that she would return to her seat, and Kim said that then they would drink everything themselves. The guy told Hyunwoo to get the catalog they received after the recent mission. Opening the booklet, Go said that it contained mostly nonsense. Kim explained that that was why he suggested having a glass of tea and sorting out the important things today. First, Kim asked Hyunwoo to take out his student ID card, and after doing so, Go discovered something new. There were some glasses in there. Kim explained that the student ID card showed the number of points available, and they were to be treated as currency within the academy. For the most part, points were earned by raiding dungeons like the recent one, and these points could be used to buy items or use institutions, but now another use was more important. Before leaving the dungeon, Go saw a message about recording and seemed to agree to something. Kim explained that such recordings could be purchased, including those of other students. So, for 100 points, the young man bought a recording of the passage of the Somi dungeon, which could be seen in the sphere. Kim assumed that since Hyunwoo won first place, his post must have sold like hotcakes, but Go was surprised that he got so many points in such a short time. Hyunwoo noted that such a large-scale sale of recordings of other people's actions was not so good. Sighing, Kim agreed with this, because people would start to analyze the fighting style of other students and look for vulnerabilities. Kim got lucky with the fixed zone rule, but in mana-based battles, people would quickly realize how weak his core was. However, considering the points, the risk was worth it, because with the points you could use the mana training room in the training center. But the most important thing was the special training hall. It had a higher mana density than other places, which allowed one to gain strength faster. Go was surprised to learn that there was such a thing here, and Kim explained that there were conditions for entry. For 6 hours of using the hall, it was necessary to pay 500 points. Hyunwoo started to wonder what would happen if he went there once a day, and Kim explained that his points would run out and he wouldn't be able to spend them on anything else. But there was another way, which was called a season pass. But it was only given to the best in the clubs, so Hyunwoo would have to take Mo Young-yoon's place to get such a pass. But given Go's current skills, that didn't seem possible. For now, it seemed better to use the accumulated points. But Kim was ready to get his friend such a pass if he promised to do something for him in return. Kim wanted that when Go became stronger, they would go into the deep dungeon together. The young man clarified that, compared to the misty forest, it could be deadly dangerous there. Hyunwoo said that as a warrior, he always craved strength. If Kim showed him the way, then Go could not help but put his life on the line. Of course, he accepted his comrade's offer. Kim told him not to be shy about living inside the special training hall for now. He was going to get a season pass within 2 weeks. Go was ready to wait that long. But while he was getting stronger, Kim needed to make one deal. Opening the door to workshop number 4, the young man politely apologized. The man sitting at the table asked who the guy was anyway. After greeting the elder, Kim explained that he came because he was interested in the magic engineering club, but the man told him to go to the first mother, not understanding why the boy came there. Kim explained that he had already been to the first workshop, but there he was sent to this place, which angered the master. Taking off his protective glasses, the guy told Kim to take a quick look around and leave so as not to disturb him, as he was busy. Kim thanked him, replying that he would behave quietly, not paying any more attention to the running man, and he turned away. The boy determined that the busy student had a magical engineering skill of approximately B rank. While completing his first objective, Kim used copy, thus acquiring a new skill. Now the young man moved on to the next target and began to look for something. Finally, the guy got the item he was looking for. Holding a glowing cube in his hands, the young man informed his elder that he had found something that did not look too valuable. The busy guy said it was a blueprint for a 10x10x10 cube that for some strange reason had pretty high stats, but no one could do anything with it, so it was just some junk. Kim said it looked interesting, but since it wasn't needed, the young man asked to take it for himself, although he would have felt like a scoundrel if he took it for free. After spending 1,000 points on the heat catalyst reagent, Kim asked if the man would be willing to trade for it. This catalyst was nothing special, but for those involved in magical engineering, there weren't many of these things. This time, the engineer decided to agree to such an exchange, but asked not to tell anyone about it. The guy was content with the fact that he had managed to save 1,000 points, and Kim, leaving the room, was thinking that, of course, this man was happy to sell trash for 1,000 points. But in fact, this item could not be called trash. Kim received the side quest Mysterious Cube, and now he needed to solve the mystery of this cube in order to receive the next quest. Of course, this task seemed like garbage, and it was unlikely that anyone would subject themselves to such a hassle. However, for the last quest from this branch, it was possible to receive an S-rank item, the Life Cube. Kim entered the training center, the Mana training hall with this cube, and he elevated countless heroes to S-rank. Naturally, he knew how to get it without going through the entire chain of quests. By using enhancement, Kim raised his magic engineering skill to S-rank. Then the young man began to twist the pieces as quickly as possible, taking out the cubes and moving them to another place. He understood that at this rate it would most likely take him 3 days. The buff ended, and the new skill was downgraded again, but a minute really was too little. With his current level of magic engineering, the guy couldn't work with the cube, so while the skill was recovering, he decided to engage in meditation to improve the core. The time until the next use of the enhancement was over. The young man decided to meditate for an hour, then work with the cube for a minute, and then repeat it all again. Kim had to finish the Life Cube by Friday because that event happened on the first Friday. In any case, it was already morning, so it was time for him to get back to his studies. Arriving at the office, Kim was surprised that Yen had arrived so early. As it turned out, she had managed to get up early. However, the boy discovered that Yunwoo had not yet arrived. Handing the guy a paper bag, the girl treated him to cookies, for which Kim thanked her. Taking the treat, Kim was amused that the cookie was in the shape of a bear. Yen was a little indignant, because in fact the cookies were in the shape of dinosaurs. Hyunwoo finally arrived and greeted his comrades. Kim noted that the guy was late and asked how he liked the special training room. Gu replied that this was the first time he had felt his internal strength develop so rapidly. With just a little more effort, he could have broken through the wall. Kim said that he would try to get a season pass as soon as possible, and Hyunwoo thanked him, but Yeon still continued to feel a little ashamed about the cookies because she was sure that they looked like dinosaurs. Entering the office and slamming the door, the manager told everyone to behave quietly and take their seats. Before starting classes, he decided to make an announcement. From today on, fights were to be held in the arena. The time limit was increased to 10 minutes, so students had to think through their strategy. All first-year students were required to participate in at least 3 battles per week. Sudok announced in advance that points would be deducted from those who did not participate. This time, Kim was determined to win. Finally, the young man received the task he desired. Now the guy had to complete 3 duels before midnight on Sunday, and the reward depended on the number of victories. Putting his hand on Hyunwoo's shoulder, Kim suggested that they go straight to the arena, as the first half of the day's recording sold the best. Go agreed to this, and the guys were about to leave, but suddenly Yen grabbed Kim by the sleeve. The surprised young man looked at their hands, and the girl said that she had free time today. Kim became very nervous, and those around him began to whisper, not understanding what this meant. Trying to clarify everything, Kim asked if she meant the manipule skill training that they discussed yesterday. Perhaps she wanted to train today. The girl nodded, confirming this. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, realizing their assumptions were wrong, and Ian and Kim agreed to meet later. A little later that day, there was almost no one in the arena. Kim and Hyunwoo were among the first to arrive. There they met Yang, who asked Buke if he knew the guy. The student replied that Kim surrendered to avoid a fight with Song. Chihong said that he had heard about this coward, and Hyunwoo, displeased, asked how such a thing could be said about the person right in front of him. Calling it dishonorable, Go wanted to teach the impudent people a lesson, but Kim stopped him again. The young man asked if the boys had done well in the qualifying rounds, noting that he himself had earned 300 points. Kim noted that Yan had the same number of points as the coward. An angry Chihong asked if Kim thought he was on the same level as him, and Yang defended himself by saying that things would have been different if he hadn't faced Chunhye in the second round. Kim then noted that Chihong was the same boy who was carried away after the lightning strike. This kind of mockery made Jan angry. He said Kim was lucky they had the same score. Chihong demanded that the coward come down. He declared that he would show him the abyss in front of them, which he did not see. And so, the boys stood on the field in front of each other. Armed with a spear, Yan said that he would finish off the enemy with one blow. Taking the staff, Kim agreed to end this fight quickly. Chihong rushed at the young man, truly intending to follow through on his words. However, the tip of the spear froze a few centimeters from Kim's face, who asked what kind of idiot one had to be to fall for the same trick twice. After flying around Jan, the hummingbird flew into his back, paralyzing him. Raising his staff, Kim apologized for not being able to finish the fight as cleanly as Chunhye. Chikon asked to stop, but the weapon was already approaching him. Ian screamed as the staff touched his head. Now it was covered in bumps. Kim laughed and noted that the coward had won. Rising with difficulty, Chihong said that he was simply caught off guard, and if they fought again, he could win. Since Yan was not ready to give up, Kim challenged him to fight again. Chihong declared that this time everything would be different. The duel began, and the boy screamed again. The paralyzed Chikon was again lying on the ground at Kim's feet, and there were even more bumps on his head. Kim asked if he hadn't learned anything at all. Raising his swollen face, Yan said that he would definitely win this time, and Kim insulted him and asked him to stop behaving like that. The winner said that he was already tired and suggested finishing for today. Kim still had to fight 3 times, but he decided to pretend he didn't want to. The young man said that if Jan wanted it that way, the guy could teach him. But before that, he demanded payment for the tuition, which again angered Chihong. However, he was still willing to pay, and decided to give Kim a spiritual pill made by his family. While taking the pill box, Kim said he had one more condition. Yang was not to record or talk about this fight. Chihong replied that it would be better for him if it was not known. Now that Kim had received his payment, he was going to fight Yang until he was satisfied. The boys had a third fight, in which Kim again emerged victorious. He decided that this should have been enough and praised Chihong's work. Getting up from the ground, Jan asked the guy to wait, as he wanted to apologize for his rudeness. Chihong said he judged too hastily and one-sidedly, and Kim was not a coward. However, the guy asked to continue pretending that he was, which puzzled Chihong. Still, Yang decided not to ask why Kim needed this. Chikon assumed that he was not the only victim. When Kim approached Hyunwoo, he learned that he only had 2 wins. Go wanted to finish his third fight and told him to go ahead. Leaving, Kim wished his friend good luck. Arriving at the Mana training hall, Kim apologized to Yen for keeping her waiting. So the young man began the first special lecture concerning manipules. The guy suggested starting to create bullets, which the girl did with ease. Kim admired Yen. Now he didn't understand how this girl had even lost a song with such a piece of mana. Today the guy decided to talk about distribution and began to explain all the aspects to Yen. A little later, Yen was already fighting with Guak Ji-chul. The girl hid behind a sandy hill, and Guak decided to also use the terrain to hide. He believed that Yen would not be able to check every hill here. However, to Yen's eyes, the abnormal flow of mana between the hills was clearly visible. And yet, Ji-chul was confident that even if the girl destroyed all the hills, she would not be able to break through his barrier. He was not afraid of the shooter who could not break through Chunhee's barrier. However, the guy clearly didn't take something into account. The mana bullet flew through the barrier, scratching Guak's cheek. Yen was pleased with herself. Kim's lessons were doing her good. Ji-chul found himself defenseless against the new bullet flying towards him, and was therefore defeated. It was already night, but still a light was burning outside one window of the academy. Looking at the records, Sudok analyzed the student's progress. Chunhe's hummingbird movements were unusual, and her control was at its peak. The same thing happened with the second one. The girl literally played with her opponents. However, that was not all. He noticed that during the selection exam, Yen only hit with a piece of mana. And today the mana bullet was already in perfect shape. Lee wondered if a person could change so much in just 2 days. He realized that such changes occurred due to his studies with Kim. Sudok was outraged again. He kept wondering who this guy really was. At the same time, Kim was in the mana training hall working on the cube. A little bit of painstaking work, and finally the guy got it right. He now possessed a rank B life cube, which enhanced the effects of life element items placed inside it by 1.3 Thanks to the spiritual pill's increased enhancement skill level, Kim was able to finish on time, and by meditating in the hall, he raised his core rank to D. Now that everything was ready, it was time to spread the word. Walking down the corridor, Kim luckily ran into a talented druid girl from the guild's nature club. The young man mentally apologized to Nari for disturbing him, but he needed her help. Animals were usually more sensitive to natural energy, and no animal would pass by such a club without reacting. Booma, Nari's cat, immediately jumped into the open cube. Everything turned out just as the guy thought. After apologizing, Pak said that she would take the animal right away, but the little tiger did not want to leave the cube. Suddenly the girl froze. Apparently she felt the energy of nature, and Kim decided it was time for him to play his role. Sighing, the young man said that he was in a bit of a hurry and asked to remove his pet. The girl apologized again and said that she would of course do it now. She tried to pull the animal out, but it dug its claws in and began to resist. Nari swore that Booma had never behaved like that. Having finally pulled out her disgruntled cat, Pak asked whether Kim was from the 3rd grade, which the young man confirmed. The girl apologized once again and, wishing them luck, headed away. This should have been enough for the Nature Club to find out about the Life Cube. Now getting a season pass would be a piece of cake. Interesting events were finally about to begin. The elderly teacher told the students that they would encounter this in a variety of places. And for a good example of a swordmaster clashing with a goblin, they had to open their textbook to a specific page. Kim timed the minute before the lunch break. When there was half a minute left, the teacher said that the lesson was over. Stretching, Shin was glad that it had finally happened. Suddenly, a strange red sphere appeared in front of the students in the office. With her rays, she touched the boys and girls, frightening them and making them scream. Everyone was wondering what had happened, since they hadn't experienced any new sensations. Byung-chul tried to figure out what kind of ball it was and assumed that it was some kind of barrier, which scared him a lot. The guy didn't know that a red number 1 appeared on his head. The students in front of Shin became worried when they saw the numbers on each other's foreheads. This was the surprise inspection. A check for prohibited items began at the Dragon Slayer Academy. A wave of prohibitions. The sphere that appeared created a magnetic field that detected the presence of prohibited items. Anything deemed unlawful for a student was added to the list of prohibited items, and the purpose of the prohibition wave was to detect contraband items. The event Kim was expecting began when he heard some very loud sounds and decided that it was Byok showing off. Hyunwoo and Yen had no marks, and the indignant Shin, who was in front, was clearly the problem. Sitting down next to Byung-chul, Kim asked if the club leader hadn't warned him about today's inspection. Shin replied that he had been told about it, but he had no idea that it would be exactly like this. Byung-chul was nervous, not knowing what to do, because if the disciplinary committee found all this, the leader would kill him. Kim asked if he could help, and Shin asked if he could. The guy replied that maybe he couldn't and turned away. And Byung-chul, with tears in her eyes, took his hand and began to beg him to help, promising to do anything for it. Kim said that then Shin would owe him. Bowing, Byung-chul agreed to this. While pulling out the life cube, Kim said to put all the forbidden things into this item, only rare and compact ones. Shin asked what would happen if they put them there, and the boy replied that they didn't have time to talk and that they just had to put everything forbidden there. Kim noted that the committee members were already approaching and would be here soon. Nervously, Byung-chul began to hastily put everything into the cube. Spreading electricity, Junhee, who entered with Somi and Byuk, ordered everyone to freeze. Song asked Kim and Shin, who were sitting under the desk, what they were doing there. Getting out from under the table, Kim replied that they were just relaxing, but Junhee, of course, didn't believe it. Shin generally stated that they were simply waiting out the break. Song demanded that the boys hand over all the prohibited items to her. The girl didn't know how Kim had slipped through the wave of prohibitions, but it was time to confess everything, because no tricks could work next to this crystal ball that was in her hand. Having brought the ball closer to the guy, the girl became nervous because he did not react in any way. Since there was no reaction, the young man asked if he could go, and Junhee, feeling ashamed, told him to sit back down. That's exactly why Kim wanted to finish the cube by Friday. The life cube was an item that provided immunity to the ban wave, and anyone who realized its true value was willing to kill to get their hands on it. So, it was time to complete the exchange. Walking between the buildings of the academy, Shin said that he was extremely grateful to Kim. Without him, Byung-chul would have gone on a direct flight to slavery. or would have been lying dead somewhere on the beach. Kim said he would still apply for repayment of the debt, and Shin replied that he never forgot debts. The guy offered to take the forbidden drug to Byung-chul's club room, who agreed, explaining that their leader wanted to meet the guy anyway. From smuggling to causing chaos, the main villains of the Dragon Slayer Academy from the Thieves Club were behind it all. As Shin opened the door, he told his boss that they were back. Kicking him away, the girl stated that he had been told to get rid of all this forbidden stuff for this week. While beating the prone Byung-chul, she said that it was important. Shin, admitting his guilt, asked for forgiveness and begged him to stop. Kim nodded his head and greeted Madame. Still holding her leg on Byung-chul's shoulder, the girl introduced herself as Dan Guyan, who, as Kim could already guess, was the head of the club. Dan heard about everything that happened today and asked to see the item that would allow her to bypass the wave of prohibitions. The three of them entered the room and Kim placed the life cube on the table in front of Guyan, who was surprised. She didn't believe it until she saw it for herself. If she could get away with it, she would have stolen something like that long ago. However, Kim noted that in that case she would have been caught immediately. Something told the guy that the head of the Thieves Club knew about the anti-theft charm, and the girl guessed that it was an item of magical technology. Dan assumed that in any case, Kim came here in search of something. The guy knew that she would immediately understand this. Gwen said to just look around. They were beggars. They didn't have much to offer. However, Kim assured that the girl would cope with his request. He stated that he wanted to get into a temporary warehouse. The corners of Dan's eyebrows lowered in displeasure, and she asked who he was. The temporary warehouse was a room where items discovered during the wave of prohibition were stored, usually studied over the weekend before disappearing into some secret storage facility whose location no one knew. However, according to Kim's calculations, this should have happened tonight or tomorrow at the latest. Now, Guyan asked him to tell her whether the disciplinary committee had sent him. The guy waved his hand and replied that he didn't get along with them. There was just something he needed. The head of the club thanked the young man for his help, but still said that he wouldn't get it for free. She had worked too hard to give it away for thanks. Kim noted that the warehouse was guarded by a disciplinary committee, and it was not easy to get in, and it was not easy to get out either. He asked if he guaranteed that the girl would leave there. Was that enough to exchange for a ticket? Gwen thought about it, and the young man said that they would leave there with a big jackpot and without a trace. Kim was sure that Dan would never refuse, and asked again if she was in. A group of 6 people stood on a hill above the academy. Pulling her mask higher, Gwen asked if everyone was there. One of the twins said that everyone was there, but they were wondering who the stranger was. Pointing to Kim, the chief said they had brought in another person to help with the case, and the girl asked everyone to introduce themselves. One of the twins was indignant, wondering if it was even normal for a newcomer to be taken on such an important mission. Shin, pretending that he didn't know Kim, said that it was nice to meet him and also advised him to simply ignore them. Clicking on her tablet, Dabin said there was 1 minute left. Guyung explained that she would be providing support from the outside and the others needed to get ready. Kimudan told him to be careful and not stand out too much once he was inside. He needed to focus on taking small and valuable things no matter what. And now their work began, and everyone rushed forward. They used Thief's steps, which made their steps faster and quieter since the magic cube was ready. Kimu's magical engineering was not needed yet. The Thief's steps skill was copied and placed into the slot. Johan stood at the door as a guard, humming a song. A purple butterfly circled above him and landed on his shoulder, and Gyum wondered why butterflies had suddenly appeared. Unexpectedly for him, the shadow butterfly burst, and a second later, Johan, enveloped in purple threads that prevented him from saying anything, fell to the ground.